Have you ever dreamed of walking beneath the wings of history's most iconic aircraft? Well, buckle up, because we're taking a virtual tour of the National Air and Space Museum. This Smithsonian Institution powerhouse isn't just one location, but two. First, we'll head to the heart of Washington, D.C., on the National Mall, where the original museum holds treasures like the Wright Flyer and the Spirit of St. Louis. But that's not all. We'll then jet out to Virginia, to the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center near Dulles International Airport. This massive annex is where the giants of the sky reside, including the colossal Space Shuttle Discovery and even the controversial Enola Gay bomber. So get ready for a journey through aviation history, from the pioneering days of flight to the marvels of modern air travel. As of the middle of 2024, a major renovation of the National Mall location of the National Air and Space Museum is underway. Luckily for us, at the Histories of Airliners channel, the America by Air display area is open. This aircraft is one of two surviving Huff Daland Duster aircraft. Originally one of 18 aircraft built in the mid-1920s by the Huff Daland Manufacturing Company in the state of New York, and a derivative of the Huff Daland military design known as the Petrel 5. These aircraft were used for dusting fields against boll weevils in the southeast United States and in the nation of Peru. Other aircraft were used in the nascent Delta Air Service passenger service. The dusting aircraft themselves were replaced by Stearman C-3Bs. Two of these aircraft were stored in Monroe, Louisiana until 1963. At that point, this aircraft was restored and put on display in 1968 at the Smithsonian Arts and Industry Building. From there, it would be on display at the Delta Museum in the 1970s, then moved to the Louisiana World Exhibition in 1984, then moved again for display in 1997 at the Cincinnati International Airport for the facility's 50th anniversary. After that, it would spend some time at the Delta Airlines Museum and then back to its current display area at the National Air and Space Museum. Built in 1930, this aircraft could hold 6 passengers in the interior of the aircraft after the single engine, while leaving the pilot above the passengers and exposed to the elements. By 1934, the Transcontinental and Western Air Company replaced the aircraft with the Douglas DC-2 and other more modern aircraft. After this aircraft was owned by a succession of owners and was at one time fitted with floats for a round-the-world record attempt that ended up not being attempted. The aircraft went from owner to owner until the 1970s, when it was willed to the Experimental Aircraft Association known as the EAA. When the Air and Space Museum learned of this plane's existence, they negotiated with the EAA, who then sent the aircraft to TWA for restoration, after which it was donated to the museum in near new condition. Sitting behind and above the Northrop Alpha 4A from Transcontinental and Western Air sits a Fairchild FC-2 that served in South America for its entire career. This FC-2 was delivered to Pan American/Grace Airways, a joint venture between Pan American Airways and Grace Shipping to serve airmail contracts to Latin and South America. The Fairchild FC-2 was designed to handle the extremes of backcountry flying, whether that was in the Arctic cold or the tropical heat. This aircraft flew for this one company until 1949, when it was donated by the company to the Smithsonian Institution for Preservation and Display. This aircraft is one of 75 built and one of 4 still in existence today in 2024. The Boeing Model 247 in general is considered by many to be the first modern airliner, although its standing as such would be usurped by the success of the Douglas DC-2 and DC-3. This particular aircraft started its paying career with United Airlines in 1934. Its main claim to fame is finishing third in the McRobertson Trophy Air Race behind a KLM-owned DC-2 and the de Havilland DH-888 Comet that was specifically designed for this race. The pilots on board the United Airlines Boeing 247 were the world-renowned Roscoe Turner and Clyde Pangborn. The aircraft was then leased for a period of time to Western Air Express, a forerunner of Western Airlines, and then in the late 1930s became a testing aircraft for the Civil Aeronautics Authority, the forerunner of today's FAA. By 1953, the aircraft was retired and donated to the Smithsonian Institution and was first put on display at the National Air and Space Museum in 1976. The Ford Trimotor passenger aircraft was the most successful version of the domestic trimotor design. Originally purchased by Southwest Air Fast Express, advertised as SAFE in 1929, it was the 39th Model 5 AT trimotor built by the Ford Company. In 1930, American Airlines bought out SAFE and repainted the aircraft in its livery of that period. For a time, it flew with American Airlines subsidiary Colonial Air Transport and then was used on American's transcontinental route in 1934. Retired by American Airlines in 1935, it then found a new operator with TACA International Airlines out of Nicaragua. By 1946, it was flying passengers and cargo in Mexico until 1954. It then returned to the United States, become a crop duster in Montana, and then trips to Alaska, and then back to Mexico, and then the aircraft was transitioned into a private residence with a chimney through the top of the aircraft. It was then reacquired and restored by American Airlines to its near original glory, and it flew cross-country in the 1960s until it was donated to the Smithsonian Institution for permanent display. Wearing Eastern Airlines Silver Falcon livery, this aircraft wore in the final years with the airline. This aircraft was delivered to Eastern Airlines in December of 1937 and flew continuously for them, even during World War II, until its last commercial flight from San Salvador to Miami, Florida in 1952. It was then donated personally by the World War I ace and Eastern Airline President Eddie Rickenbacker to the Smithsonian Institution. The earliest picture we can find of this aircraft on display at the National Air and Space Museum is from 1978. On the display floor of the America by Air section of this museum is one of two airliners in this display that have partial sections of the interior that can be viewed by the general public. This particular aircraft was named Flagship Vermont and is currently painted in the American Airlines Flagship Lightning Bolt livery. This aircraft spent its entire career with American Airlines between 1956 and 1962. Today, only the forward fuselage section remains, but the interior can be visited so that the viewing public can see the 1950s-style interior seating and cockpit. A pilot's uniform on a mannequin is also on display inside the aircraft. By far the largest and heaviest aircraft on display in the Washington, D.C. location of the National Air and Space Museum. This aircraft wore the Northwest Orient livery and the red bowling shoe livery that Northwest is still remembered for during its career. It started with Northwest Orient in 1969 and continued flying with Northwest until the year 2000. The aircraft was stored at the Laurinburg-Maxson Airport in North Carolina and had its forward section cut off and transported up to the National Air and Space Museum to be put on display in the America by Air section of the museum in 2007. The upper-level flight deck is accessible for viewing by the general public. In Northern Virginia, on the land also occupied by the Dulles International Airport, we find the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center, an annexed facility of the overall National Air and Space Museum. The Boeing Model 367-80, or known as the Dash 80 for short. This aircraft was the prototype aircraft for both the passenger-carrying Boeing 707 and its derivatives and the military KC-135 family of transports, tankers, and other specialist aircraft. The Dash 80 was built using Boeing's experience with jet-powered aircraft such as the Boeing B-47 and the Boeing B-52 bombers. This aircraft survived one collapsed landing gear during ground testing in time for its first flight on July 15th of 1954. Initially, the airlines weren't interested in jet airliners, so on August 6 of 1950, Boeing test pilot Alvin Tex Johnston was instructed to fly straight and level over a boat race occurring near Seattle. However, he would become famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, flew the aircraft in a 1G barrel roll. The aircraft was retired in 1973 and then restored to flight-worthy status in 2003 and flown to permanent display with the Air and Space Museum. Our next aircraft is the Aerospatiale Air France Concorde, a unique member of a unique aircraft type. This aircraft was delivered to Air France in 1975, and this Concorde flew Air France's first commercial flight between Paris, Dakar, and then Rio. From January of 1979 to January of 1980, this aircraft was leased by Braniff International Airways for subsonic flights deeper into the United States than British Airways or Air France Concordes typically flew. A major overhaul that took the aircraft down to its skeleton was completed in early of August of 1990. This aircraft's last flight was on May 30th of 2003 from Paris to Dulles International Airport for the purpose of being put on display at the Udvar Hazy Annex Museum. Near the tail end of the Concorde is a Grumman Goose amphibious aircraft, built in 1938 and sold to its first company called Asiatic Petroleum Corporation – Venezuela Oil Development for use in finding likely spots for oil drilling. The second owner, Shell Oil of Ecuador, used this aircraft for similar purposes. This aircraft then went through a series of owners that either used it for short passenger hops out to nearby islands, specifically in the Miami, Florida, or Catalina Islands, California areas, or as a VIP aircraft. Restored to pristine condition in the 1980s, this aircraft was originally displayed at the Washington, D.C. location of the museum before being moved to the Udvar Hazy Annex Museum sometime in the 2000s. An aircraft that had a very bumpy trip from construction in 1940 to its current resting place at the Udvar Hazy Annex Museum is this Boeing Stratoliner. This aircraft was designed as a development of the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress. This aircraft initially served with Pan American Airways as Clipper Flying Cloud, before going on to other jobs that include being the private aircraft of Haitian dictator François Duvalier. It would eventually end up in the museum collection at the Pima Air and Space Museum outside of Tucson, Arizona. In 2002, after being restored by Boeing in the Seattle area, during the flight that was supposed to deliver it to the Udvar Hazy Annex, it ran into fuel problems and had to ditch into Elliott Bay off of Puget Sound. The aircraft was taken out of the water, restored again, and finally made its way to the museum. What looks like a pre-World War II Junkers 52 trimotor passenger aircraft is in actuality a Casa 352 Lima, a license-built aircraft in Spain from the 1940s to the 1950s. This particular aircraft's career started with the Spanish Air Force, although it is unknown what years that service covered. It was eventually shipped to Great Britain for use in movies and as a museum piece, for a period of time covering the late 1970s to the late 1980s. The aircraft was eventually given to Lufthansa for restoration, after which it was donated to the National Air and Space Museum for display in 1987. This aircraft can currently be seen, as of 2024, across the walkway from the Boeing Model 367-80, intermixed with some light aircraft. This aircraft is one of the smallest members of the airliner collection that can be found at the Udvar Hazy facility, nestled up next to the Grumman Goose and the Aerospatiale Concorde. This aircraft has only had 2 owner-operators before becoming a museum piece. Delivered to Pan American Business Jets in 1970, it was then sold to Federal Express in 1972, when that company was just beginning to start its Air Express service. The success that this aircraft and its one sibling at the beginning of Federal Express allowed them to obtain larger aircraft to ship even more packages. This aircraft was the first foreign-built aircraft put on display at the Udvar Hazy facility. First of all, I want to apologize for not having enough good video of this aircraft. This aircraft was originally built as a Douglas M4 for the U.S. Post Office in 1926, but was soon converted into a shorter-winged M2 when it began service with Western Air Express in 1927. However, this aircraft's career was short due to a crash in 1930. The wrecked aircraft was traded from owner to owner until 1940, when Western Airlines purchased this aircraft for restoration. For many years, it was on display at the Western Airlines hangar at the Los Angeles International Airport. Restored to flyable condition in 1976, it completed a transcontinental journey in 1977 before being donated to the Smithsonian Institution for a permanent display. The National Air and Space Museum's collection represented not just a hangar full of metal and rivets, but a timeline of human ambition. From the pioneering biplanes to the sleek jets that crisscross the globe, these airliners stand as testaments to our endless quest to reach for the horizon. As you walk amongst them, remember they're not just exhibits, they're portals to journeys past and whispers of incredible destinations yet to come. So the next time you board a plane, take a moment to appreciate the marvel of modern flight. After all, you're not just a passenger, you're part of a legacy that stretches back to these very halls and a future where the skies hold even more possibilities. Thank you for watching this video today. As you can see, with a couple exceptions, this video is primarily a video presentation. Vice the usual picture slideshow I normally produce. These are the kind of videos I'd like to make more of, but for that to happen, I need everyone who watches these videos to watch the entire presentation. Plus, for those of you who think expanding my presentations to other museums and can donate money to that cause, please do. You can do this by 3 methods. 1. Give me a super thanks for a one-time donation. You can also become a member of this channel which will give you and other members certain benefits. Lastly, you can join my Patreon account with the same membership perks my YouTube channel members get. However you wish to support this channel will be appreciated. Thank you for your time and attention.